Coming up on a newscast tonight, President Moon Jae-in holds a private conversation with Pope Francis with only translators present. The president is expected to pass to the pontiff an invitation from North Korea's Kim Jong-un. The Bank of Korea left its key rate unchanged but lowered its growth forecast for the local economy to 2.7%, mainly due to rising economic uncertainties at home and abroad. Prime Minister Lee Na-kyun urged ministries to push forward with deregulation efforts. He even unveiled new government measures to remove various barriers and constraints. News Center begins now. It's 8 p.m. here in Korea, live from our studio in Seoul. This is Arirang News Center. Welcome to our program. I'm Daniel Cha. President Moon Jae-in, on a 5-nation tour of Europe, is believed to be meeting with Pope Francis at the Vatican as we speak. For the latest on that high-profile session, we connect with our Cheongwade correspondent, Shin Se-min, right now. Se-min, any updates on the situation right now?
Yes, Daniel, we do have a bit of an update, and here's what we know. We have the messages shared by President Moon Jae-in and Pope Francis during their less than an hour, 1-hour meeting, in which President Moon had urged for support for peace on the Korean Peninsula, to which the pontiff have responded by saying that he will pray with the world. And moments ago, we were told by the entire meeting that in which included private conversations with just translators in the room had wrapped up. So the entire meeting between the president and pontiff went on for about 50 minutes, with their just private time one-on-one being present for about 38 minutes, a little less than 40 minutes. And upon their meetup today, they have exchanged some brief greetings in which the president had thanked the Pope for the Holy See's efforts in holding that special Mass for peace during the Synod Week, or meeting of the bishops from around the world. And we also have been told by the presidential office that the two will be exchanging gifts, and the details of that coming up soon. And as for the content of their meetings today, although we're still waiting on the details of that, we know that President Moon would be passing on to Pope Francis an invitation from North Korea's Kim Jong-un to visit the regime's capital of Pyongyang. Kim had said that he would, quote, ardently welcome the pontiff should he visit the regime of capital. Now, the Pope's stance on the visit to the north is still unclear, but he is expected to visit and travel to Japan next year. And there's not only the Pope's potential visit, but also the issue of getting entire support from the head of the Roman Catholic Church, to which we have learned moments ago that he will pray with the world for the peace drive on the Korean Peninsula. And following their conversation, the president will be meeting with the Cardinal Secretary of State Pietro Parolin and President Moon's last schedule before leaving for Belgium. And he will have checked off 3 of the 5 countries on his tour, and the remainder of the president's trip will take him to the Asia-Europe meeting, or ASEM, in Brussels, and the P4G Copenhagen Summit in Denmark. Daniel?
All right, Se-min, thank you for those exciting updates. We appreciate it. At the Vatican, before meeting Pope Francis, President Moon Jae-in summoned the faithful of the Roman Catholic Church during a special Mass dedicated to the Korean Peninsula. He reassured the attendees that lasting peace will be achieved between Seoul and Pyongyang. Park Hee-jun brings us the highlights of his speech.
President Moon making the most of his time in the limelight to talk about a subject so close to his heart.
오늘 성 베드로 대성당에서 올린 한반도 평화를 위한 기도는 평화를 염원하는 세계인 모두의 가슴에 희망의 메아리로 울려 퍼질 것입니다. 평화를 염원하는 우리 국민에게 큰 힘이 될 것입니다. 오늘 우리의 기도는 현실 속에서 반드시 실현될 것입니다. 우리는 기필코 평화를 이루고 분단을 극복해낼 것입니다.
President Moon stood on the podium at St. Peter's Basilica during a special Mass for Peace, the first Korean leader to give an address at the event, presided over by the pontiff's top diplomats, Cardinal Secretary of State Pietro Parolin. It's what the Vatican described as unique and exceptional, as the Holy See very rarely holds special masses for individual countries. President Moon, a Catholic himself, summoned his fellow Roman Catholic Church faithful that amazing changes are already happening on the peninsula, stressing the Koreas are faithfully keeping their promises, the scrapping of weapons and guard posts, and removing landmines from what used to be the world's most heavily fortified border.
기독교와 유럽 문명이 꽃피운 인류애가 시간과 공간을 뛰어넘어 한반도에 용기를 주었습니다. EU가 구현해온 포용과 연대의 정신이 한반도의 항구적 평화를 향한 여정에 영감을 주고 있습니다.
The president asked the Vatican to continue praying for peace on the peninsula, saying he's certain it will be achieved. In his homily, Parolin prayed for the gift of peace on the Korean Peninsula, so after years of tensions and division, the word peace can fully ring out. Park Hee-jun, Arirang News.
The leaders of South Korea and Italy agreed to boost bilateral ties by signing an MOU. They also saw eye to eye on the need to address North Korea's denuclearization together. Kim Hyo-sun tells us more.
An upgrade to the relationship between South Korea and Italy. During his stay in Rome, the South Korean leader inked 3 new agreements with Italy on cooperation in defense, air services, and trade. President Moon Jae-in, holding back-to-back meetings with the president and the prime minister of Italy, worked on establishing stronger ties between the two countries. South Korea's presidential office says the leaders agreed to expand the level of their ties to a strategic partnership while discussing ways to increase their cooperation in political and defense sectors, trade and investments, and science technology. Under the Memorandum of Understanding, the two countries agreed to hold a biannual strategic meeting where they will discuss ways to boost cooperation in the areas of industry, energy, and trade promotion. And the air service agreement calls for joint efforts to up the number of flyers and cargo flights between Seoul and Rome as a way to promote trade and people-to-people exchanges. The agreement for defense ties was not released immediately, with the Blue House explaining it will be made public after the two sides complete their internal reviews. President Moon also urged Italian leaders to support his country's efforts to denuclearize the Korean Peninsula and brief them on his 3 summits with North Korea's Kim Jong-un. The Italian Prime Minister expressed his full support for President Moon's diplomatic initiatives on North Korea, adding that denuclearization must be done in a verifiable and irreversible manner. Kim Hyo-sun, Arirang News.
South Korea's central bank left its key rate unchanged. In terms of economic growth, the BOK lowered its earlier estimate, taking into account rising uncertainties in the nation and abroad. Kim Hyo-sung breaks down the digits for us.
The Bank of Korea on Thursday lowered its growth forecast for the local economy to 2.7% from July's 2.9%. That would mark the slowest growth since 2012.
Our revised growth forecast has been lowered to reflect second quarter growth, but it remains in line with the potential growth rate. We forecast inflation to be in the mid to upper 1% range.
The central bank forecasts growth to decelerate on falling investment and slower export growth due to the escalating U.S.-China trade spat. It says consumer price inflation will hit 1.6% this year on rising agricultural food and oil prices, closer to its 2% target. Citing weak job growth and trade uncertainties, the Bank of Korea kept its benchmark interest rate unchanged at 1.5%. The number of newly added jobs in the country fell below the 100,000 mark for the 3rd consecutive month in September. But growing household debt and increasing capital market risk is adding pressure on the BOK to lift rates. 2 of the bank's 7 board members voted to raise rates on Thursday.
We're seeing higher financial market volatility. Following the 3rd U.S. rate hike last month, emerging markets and Korea's financial markets saw their stock markets tumble. Foreign investors sold off Korean bonds and the won weakened. If financial instability continues, it could result in capital flight and affect Korea's real economy.
October's monetary decision leaves the U.S. interest rate 75 basis points higher than Korea's. With the Fed expected to raise rates in December and Korea's economy to slow down further in 2019, experts say the Bank of Korea is highly likely to raise its key rate next month in its final monetary policy meeting this year. Kim Hae-sung, Arirang News.
Seoul's Prime Minister highlighted the need to keep on cutting red tape. During the meeting with various ministers, he also unveiled some new government measures. Choi Seung outlines what they are.
Prime Minister Lee Na-kyun, during his meeting with relevant ministers on Thursday, urged ministers to push forward with deregulation efforts.
If left alone, regulations will mount up and go out of date. Hence, deregulation efforts must go on.
He also called on his Policy Coordination Office to keep the meeting up to date with new deregulation measures conducive to new businesses. The PM went on to unveil the government measures aimed at removing barriers to market entry. Aspiring entrepreneurs will now face easier business licensing and registration procedures. For example, the government deleted the concern of excessive competition clause as one of the qualifications when licensing new airlines due to its ambiguity. More private enterprises will also enjoy opportunities to participate in the public sector. Previously, the government usually entrusted such public sector work to state enterprises. Some business constraints will also be removed. LPG sellers will now be able to supply larger tanks of gas. They were restricted to providing smaller volumes, but improvements in safety led the government to increase supply volumes. Businesses going through temporary financial challenges will now also be considered for public procurement projects. Previously, companies struggling financially could not secure government contracts even if they had excellent performance records or expertise. Referring to a series of deregulation bills the Parliament passed in September, the Prime Minister called on the National Assembly to continue its efforts. He asked the government to remain prepared to implement those changes once the bills get enacted. Choi Seung, Arirang News.
The country's household debt is estimated to have reached around $1.3 trillion. To fight this trend, the government announced stricter loan screening rules for banks. Ko Roon-hee explains how the changes would work.
South Korea's Financial Services Commission and Financial Supervisory Service announced on Thursday that they're creating a specific standard based on the debt service ratio for what is classed as a risky bank loan. Vice Chairman of the FSC, Kim Yong-bum, said this change, which will come into effect at the end of the month, will help lower the rate of household debt growth.
Although household debt problems are less likely to spread to systematic risks, the absolute size is large and the growth rate is fast. Credit management measures such as the debt service ratio and rent interest ratio should be implemented to further slow down debt growth.
The debt service ratio, or DSR, is calculated by dividing a borrower's annual income by their annual debt repayments, including interest. A high DSR is negative from the bank's point of view. Since March this year, banks have applied their own debt service ratio standards to almost all household loans on a pilot basis. Each bank had a different definition of a risky borrowing, but their average definition of a high DSR was 100%. According to the FSC's new announcement, loans with DSRs exceeding 70% will now be categorized as a high DSR, and banks should limit these to 15% of new loans. And only 10% of new loans will be allowed to have a DSR above 90%. Commercial, regional, and specialized banks will have different limitations. The Financial Supervisory Service is expected to check if banks are following these measures on a monthly basis. Meanwhile, the government aims to reduce the average DSR of commercial banks to 40% by the end of 2021, which is around 10% lower than their average DSR last June. Ko Roon-hee, Arirang News.
The National Assembly is almost halfway through its audit of government ministries and state-run agencies. Rival parties once again clashed over the income-led growth policy and the nuclear-free energy agenda. Kim Mo-kyun has the latest from Parliament.
In the spotlight of the Parliament's government audit on Thursday was the Finance Committee. Rival parties once again clashed over the government's income-led growth policies. The ruling party says they're needed to address the country's structural problems.
We need the income-led growth policy to stop the vicious cycle of low consumption, low production, low investment, and underemployment. If this does not work, our economy will move backwards and we will repeat our past mistakes.
The opposition, though, says the policies need to be scrapped because they're weighing on the vulnerable.
According to a survey by Real Meter, many of the economically vulnerable say the policy is not effective. More than 60% of the total respondents agree on the need to scrap the policy or adjust its speed. I think we should seriously consider those options.
Over at the Industry Committee, where the Korea Hydro and Nuclear Power Corporation was under the microscope, rival lawmakers again debated the government's nuclear-free energy initiatives. The opposition parties criticized President Moon's anti-nuclear policy, arguing that it's economically inefficient and could result in environmental damage. Ruling party lawmakers argued back that a nuclear-dependent energy system could be more burdensome to the public, citing the losses recorded by one of Korea's longest-running nuclear reactors, the Hwalsong-1. And at the Public Administration and Security Committee, the hot potato was a scandal involving the operator of the Seoul subway for giving job favors to relatives of its employees. The opposition parties called for a parliamentary probe, while ruling party lawmakers and the Seoul City mayor said that they will await the outcome of the inspection, claiming that nothing has been confirmed yet. Kim Mo-kyan, Arirang News.
On the list of audits today was Arirang TV, South Korea's only international English language broadcaster. According to our Kim Min-ji, rival parties agreed on the growing importance of the station's role in the global arena and called on the government to provide a stable financial footing.
In light of the recent peace momentum on the Korean Peninsula and with K-pop and other Hallyu content being dispersed to all corners of the globe, rival parties recognize the need for Arirang TV to play a greater role on the global stage. They said that Arirang, as the main English broadcasting station during the Inter-Korean summits in April and September, demonstrated the importance of its role as an international broadcaster.
During the Pyongyang summit, Arirang's online viewers topped 15 million. I believe this is an example showing the importance of international broadcasters. With peace taking shape on the peninsula and Hallyu spreading worldwide, Arirang's role will be even more important.
But a chronic problem the state-funded broadcaster has faced is its budget, due in part to lackluster government support, forcing Arirang to sustain itself in part with its own funding. And after this year's budget was slashed by about 10% to 53 billion won, or about $47 million, the station was forced to make a 27% cut in its budget for program production.
I don't know if it's appropriate to say, but it feels like we've been neglected. I ask for your support in dealing with our legal, financial, and systematic issues.
Rival lawmakers also compared the situation to that with other international broadcasters, saying that the budget itself and labor force are incomparable.
I agree that we need to deal with Arirang's legal, systematic, and financial issues. Arirang TV only has 26 reporters. In some countries, they have as much as 1,000. This is a shame. The budget for global broadcasters in the U.S. is about $230 million, and for China, over $2 billion. This is an issue we should resolve regardless of political party.
Rival parties also took aim at the Culture Ministry, of which Arirang TV is an affiliate, for not doing much on its part.
What has the Culture Ministry done to secure an extra budget for Arirang, especially when Hallyu has been spreading across the world? The world needs to turn to Arirang TV to find out about Korean issues. I also call on our committee to deliberate next year's budget thoroughly so that Arirang can carry out its role.
Currently, the government has set aside 39.8 billion won, or roughly $35 million, for Arirang for 2019. It remains to be seen whether the broadcaster will be able to get much of a boost to that number. But with the rival parties on the same page, there's a glint of hope. The National Assembly will start deliberating next year's budget in November. Kim Min-ji, Arirang News.
Moving on to other stories now, carpooling or ride-sharing services helps people save money by splitting the costs of transportation. But this innovative shared economy platform, which thrives in some countries, has faced a backlash in the Korean market. A large-scale demonstration was held by the nation's taxi unions. Won Jung-hwan went to hear directly from the angry protesters.
These
These are the fierce chants of more than 30,000 taxi drivers at Seoul's Gwanghwamun Square. Korea's taxi labor unions have gathered from across the country to protest against the latest product from one of the nation's biggest web companies. And nearly half of the capital's taxi drivers went on a strike for 24 hours starting Thursday at 4 a.m. The demonstration comes after Kakao Mobility, a car-sharing company, started recruiting drivers on Tuesday for the launch of a carpool service. The taxi drivers say it would take a major toll on their business and steal their jobs.
We cannot tolerate big corporations encroaching on our market. We will fight to the end for our right to survive.
Kakao, however, claims the service will fill a need at certain times of the day and night, like rush hour, when there aren't enough taxis. Also, its user-friendly interface will be easy for consumers to access, and a ride will be slightly cheaper than taxi fares. But the taxi drivers are skeptical.
There is no way the government or other authorities can fully enforce the rules on time. We simply cannot believe that.
There are some 260,000 taxis in the country, and we carry 5 million passengers per day. If Kakao recruits 2 million drivers, we will have no one to pick up.
The standoff has reignited the controversy over how Korea should implement the shared economy business model that has struggled to take root.
The government has been reviewing measures aimed at improving taxi services and expanding carpooling ventures. But the longer it takes to find a middle ground between the two parties, the more the consumers could end up losing out. 원정환, Arirang News.
When walking by beautiful buildings or homes with unique designs, we do wonder what the interior might look like. Through October 21st, a special festival that will let you go behind the keyhole is held in the nation. Hong Yu provides a glimpse of what to expect from Open House Seoul.
People have gathered at a pre-arranged location where they're to meet with the architect of a private house, one that they have been granted access for a special project. The time for the tour finally arrives and the architect walks the visitors through her house explaining the details of the structure. The house is a modern version of Korea's traditional hanok, one that harmonizes up-to-date housing features against a traditional architectural framework, resulting in a fusion hanok that blends modernity and tradition into a comfortable home.
The older versions of hanok were not efficient at blocking the drafts, especially during the cold seasons, mainly because of the type of wood used. However, the wood used in the more modern versions featured advanced insulating functions, standing out from its Joseon counterparts. Another feature is that bathrooms were brought indoors, adding to convenience.
These two houses are among 79 structures that have been opened to the public for the festival Open House Seoul.
I hope those visiting the Open House Seoul no longer think of architecture as something unfamiliar, as something that has nothing to do with them. Instead, I want them to know that architecture has everything to do with how and where we live.
This project, which first originated in London and spread to other major cities, was introduced in Seoul in 2014, becoming increasingly popular year after year.
The structure is not just about the design, but also about how it came to be. By sharing their thoughts, architects are trying to help the people have a better understanding about the environment they live in. Hong Yu, Arirang News.
Global K-pop sensation BTS made the cover of Time magazine. Fans are eager to get their hands on a copy, leading to a surge in sales. Seo Eun-kyung has the full story.
Another big achievement for BTS. The 7-member boy band became the first K-pop artist to feature on the cover of Time magazine. The October edition of Time magazine, with BTS on the cover, has been explosive in sales as fans of the boy band scramble to buy copies. According to gov't Center, the largest bookstore chain in Korea, over 3,000 copies of the October edition of Time has been sold online over the past 10 days, and 1,000 copies have been sold in gov's bookstore in the past week. The bookstore chain does not usually sell weekly magazine online, but it made an exception to meet high consumer demand. gov't Center said that it usually sells around 100 copies of Time magazine each week. Other online distributors have also seen sales go through the roof. online retailer Yes24 said that a total of 13,000 copies were pre-ordered before its official sale began. The magazine is the #1 bestseller in Yes24's foreign books and overseas magazine section. The K-pop mega group are among Time magazine's annual picks for next-generation leaders under the title of Taking K-pop Worldwide. Time described the group as the most popular boy band in the world. It also compared their performances to Beatles, One Direction, New Kids on the Block, and NSYNC, and added that BTS is breaking new ground by achieving global success without catering to Western audiences. Meanwhile, the K-pop superstars renewed their 7-year exclusive contract with Big Hit Entertainment on Thursday. They're currently on a world tour to promote their Love Yourself album series. 서은경, Arirang News.
Time to turn to Michelle back at the Weather Center for the updates you need. Michelle, the nation received the first snow of the season today, and I hear more is expected tonight.
The cold overnight temperature left Mount Seoraksan blanketed by snow this morning, which was 16 days earlier than last year. Now, more snow is expected there tonight, while the East Coast gets rain of up to 60 millimeters. Now, meanwhile, the inland areas will see light rain through the night. And the weather will look better by tomorrow afternoon, though. Beijing will be cloudier but warmer, and Tokyo will get another shower. The morning lows will be 2 to 4 degrees Celsius lower than the seasonal average, Seoul beginning tomorrow morning at 7 degrees. And the highs will be similar nationwide, the mercury lingering between 18 and 19 degrees. Now, as the cold continental high pressure expands, the temperature will be below the norms for a while, but aside from that, the weekend weather looks perfect. I'll leave you with the weather conditions around the world.
And this just coming in from the Vatican. The Pope said that he may visit Pyongyang when officially invited. We look forward to more positive developments coming from the Vatican and from Pyongyang soon. That's all we have for you on tonight's edition of Arirang News Center. Thanks for staying with us.